Hello to all Earth citizens and welcome to my Conscious Coaching Podcast. This is Dr. Kianush, founder and creative director of MCCG. My Conscious Coaching Group is a non-political, non-religious 501c3 coaching nonprofit with initiatives in healthcare, leadership, and education with focus on emotional and spiritual intelligence. Our vision is to raise self and global awareness for a conscious mind through education and application of EQ and SQ, and our mission is to connect, collaborate, and partner with hospitals, academics, colleges, and medical schools and organizations to embrace growth, self-healing, and self-coaching to achieve well-being and peak performance of individuals and the team as a one connected whole. Today, our guest speaker is one of our recent board members at my Conscious Coaching, Dr. David Pincus. J.D. Pincus, PhD, is Chief Innovation Officer at Leading Indicator System, our Agile brain, focusing on emerging methods for measuring emotions and motivation. He developed the unified pyramid model of human motivation and the Agile brain measurement technique. His comprehensive motivational model was published in Integrative Psychological and Behavioral Science, as well as applications of the pyramid model to the problem of employee engagement, employee well-being, organizational culture, human values, leadership, and team dynamic. His seminal article on the concept of motivation in applied psychology, published in the Journal of Consumer Behavior, has been cited in 218 subsequent papers. David is a fellow of the Employee Benefit Research Institute, a Washington, D.C.-based think tank. He was named Researcher of the Year by PMRG and named to the Power List by Senior Market Advisor magazine. His book, The Emotionally Agile Brain, Mastering the 12 Emotional Needs That Drive Us, is being published as we are speaking in December 2024. To be precise, December 17, I guess. Welcome to our podcast, David, and also to our Conscious Coaching movement.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kianush. It's great to be here.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for giving us your wisdom, and sharing your talent, and all the works that you are doing for the world with our podcast. David, let us know, how do you like the world to know you, and how they shall remember you actually?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's sort of what do you want your legacy to be? Exactly. Which is, I've seen this phrased as the headstone test, which is, what is your legacy ideally going to be? And for me, I think I kind of went through a transformation personally, in that I was sort of, like most people coming out of school, sort of focused primarily on material success, advancement, recognition, all of those kinds of things that people want, growth. But ultimately, I found that was a little bit unsatisfying. I think it's sort of a natural maturation process that goes on. And that at a certain point in my life, it was probably, about a decade ago or so, I really started thinking about, all the work I was doing in motivation and emotion and wanting to, sort of use it for good, instead of just using it for sort of commercial purposes. I wanted to start thinking about how do we actually use this to improve people's lives. And that's really the focus of my book, also kind of talking about that journey from all of these great discoveries in neuroscience and behavioral economics and how they're sort of being misused right now for commercial ends. And so I'd like to be remembered as sort of somebody who kind of pulled away a bit from that, sort of misuse of this information and started down a path of using it to actually make people, really be more of who they can be.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate your cause, and the legacy. I do remember you as a wise, intelligent, good man, and very humble, actually. So I was reading your bio and doing an observation on all the works and research you have done, and I've been knowing you for a while, and I thought to myself, oh, what a humble man. So I appreciate all this wisdom and glad that you are sharing it with our world and the extended world, actually, and our listener as well. So you told me a little bit about the story behind your Agile Brain community and I mean your legacy. So, but when was the assessment idea came to reality actually, and when was published? I kind of want a little timeline on that.
Sure. So it took a while actually to get it published, because what I found was that a lot of people, sort of academic reviewers, weren't really sure what to do with a theory of motivation that included spirituality. I think they had a sort of natural reluctance. They weren't really sure what to do with it. It's a growing field, even in academic psychology, but I don't think it sort of penetrated all corners. So when I was looking to, journals that focused on motivation and emotion, those aren't necessarily the same people who sort of accept the importance and centrality of the spiritual domain. So it did take, years of rewrites and trying lots of different publications to get it published. I finally got it published in about 2 years ago in 2022. Of course, I've been working on this for a lot longer than that. This concept had been, swimming around in my mind for more than a decade. And I think creating the assessment the way we did is something that really came about through my collaboration with Leading Indicator Systems. They had a platform. They had developers, programmers, where we could actually, and Bill Nolan, who's a doctor of psychometrics on staff, who actually, knows how to validate and test all this stuff. So it was really kind of the perfect marriage of, sort of my concept and my theory along with their ability to execute. So that's what we've been doing now for, the past several years.
Yeah, wonderful. I've taken your assessment myself, and what I like about it, especially that I work, with the physician and healthcare community, and very busy people, it's quick. It's only 3 minutes, and it's very visual. It's based on the picture. We are going to get into the details, later in our conversation. But before that, I just wanted to ask you, why do you think that people need to create, why did you need to create a model of the human needs? Didn't Maslow already did that? And maybe we have to talk a little bit about Maslow first and then see the difference.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think that there is a need for a unified model of human needs, or there was a need. Hopefully I filled that need. Yeah. But Maslow and everyone else who studied motivation and emotional needs in the history of psychology really took it from a starting point that was very specific. So Maslow was interested in the sort of rare, self-actualized individuals. So that was his starting point. And he was interested in sort of how do they get there? Where does self-actualization fall in a hierarchy of motivational needs? And so he proposed, well, there's the needs for safety. And on top of that, there's the need for love and connection, belonging. On top of that, there's the need for esteem, to be sort of well regarded by others. And then he put the need for self-actualization on top of that as sort of the peak. He actually also proposed another need in his later work that almost never gets taught, unfortunately, which is the need for transcendence, for self-transcendence. Yeah. Interestingly, Lawrence Kohlberg, in his model of development of moral development, had also later in his life included the need for self-transcendence as the highest level. And sadly, those things don't really get taught in intro psych at all. I think because of this sort of bias in academic psychology against the spiritual. Nevertheless, anyway, Maslow had a great model. It was very useful. So did Kohlberg. So did many others. I identified, went back and did a literature review. There were more than 100 different concepts of needs in the psychological literature. And if you just sort of metaphorically take these, let's say it's 120 concepts and you just pour them out on the table, and you begin sorting them into piles, of similarities, you quickly see that a lot of researchers focused on the self, like Maslow did. It starts with feeling psychologically safe. It ends with, self-actualization. You had other researchers like David McClelland who were really focused on the world of work. And they were interested in things like the need for power and the need for achievement. You had people like Csikszentmihalyi, who was focused on flow theory, which is really another work-related or play-related phenomenon. So you had that domain sort of showing up. A lot of people focus on needs in the emotional world, in the social world. You had needs for inclusion, belonging, acceptance. It goes by many different names: caring, intimacy, respect, validation, all of those kinds of things that are social emotions. And Harlow and Bowlby and Ainsworth and the like all published extensively in that area. And then you had people like Piaget and Kohlberg and more recently, some other Paul Bloom and Josh Green at Harvard, who were really making a name for themselves in the spiritual domain, really focusing on, where does morality come from? Why is it that babies, at only a few months old already show a preference for good guys over bad guys, in sort of puppet shows, that sort of thing. And just getting to just how fundamental and basic those needs are. All of these things had been discussed and expressed, but no one had ever taken the time to actually create a model that spoke to the first principles of what was going on. So that's why I think this model was needed. And when you do that, when you identify those four domains, the self, material, social, and spiritual, and you cross them by three levels of striving, foundational, experiential, and aspirational, you end up with 12 cells. And it turns out that those 12 cells account for every single concept in the history of psychology in terms of needs. I don't think that's by accident. I think it's once you've identified the first principles, the rest sort of falls into place.
Thank you for clarification on that. Very interesting, And why do you think, David, the spiritual domain has been neglected by motivation researchers for so long? Or in another way, what is it about that those needs that make academic psychologists uncomfortable?
Yeah, well, if you think about motivation theory and where it started, it started with people like Sigmund Freud, who, was basically tying it to a whole bunch of, unacceptable urges, or at least in, Victorian Vienna. He was very closely connected with the urge for sex and for death, eros and thanatos. So already that makes people uncomfortable, right? And then the fact that he had a lot of things that were sort of unique to his time, it kind of gave his perspective a kind of a bad rap. It was taken in another direction by Jung, who kind of deepened it, I think, a bit, taking it to sort of what's, universal and archetypal in our species development. Again, very interesting stuff, very on point, but again, not really in line with where, like, behaviorists, for instance, were going. They were trying to turn everything into something that could be observable and something that could be measured. So that was not really a fit. Then you had the humanists kind of coming into play, and they began talking about things, but again, it was like Maslow. He didn't really start talking about self-transcendence until late in his career, and Kohlberg, same thing. I think there's been a reluctance to sort of a fear of dealing with anything that sort of smacks of spirituality, a higher power, God, religion, any of those things, because it's controversial. It can be off-putting to people. And it was just easier, I think, for them to just ignore it and pretend it wasn't there, which is, I think, completely crazy, considering when you think about what people are willing to do for a higher principle, is some of the most extreme behaviors known to man. And to simply ignore that and leave it out of needs models, I thought is really unacceptable.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. So can you tell us now a little bit about your Agile brain assessment by itself and who is using it and how it's
Sure.
working, the assessment is working?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Agile Brain Assessment is an image-based assessment. So it's right of the way, it's very different than other assessments. We just actually got listed in the Burroughs yearbook, which is a sort of compendium of all of the different, approved standard assessments for psychology and psychiatry. So that was a big deal. But all the other assessments that are in that book, for the most part, are paper and pencil kind of, you look at a statement and you agree on a scale, agree somewhat, agree strongly, etc. Ours is we just show people images and they either click on them or they don't. We measure how quickly they pick the images, and that goes into an algorithm. We also measure sort of what they picked and what they didn't pick. All of that goes into an algorithm and basically produces a set of scores in these 12 domains, the 12 needs that I mentioned. We do it on the positive side. So we do it in terms of your promotional needs, needs for wanting more of the good. So let's say I want to feel, a greater sense of self-actualization. That's a sort of promotional need. Or I could feel in that same cell, in that same need, a need to feel less limited, less constrained. So we measure both sides of that motivational coin. We measure, promotional needs for more of the good, and preventative needs for less of the bad. So even with all of that, we show you, less than 100 images. Each one is only shown for about a second. The time course is actually specified by some neuroscience that was done by Antonio Damasio's lab that shows that you have an emotional reaction before you have a cognitive or rationalization or decision. What we're doing is limiting your time to respond to these images within that sort of emotion only period. And that makes all the difference. So people often will take the assessment and say, I wish I had more time to think about the images. I wish I could see, multiple images at the same time and I could make my choices. There's a reason we don't do that. It's because that's engaging a completely different part of your brain. It's a completely different, sort of rational cognitive system. And the reason that this works so well is that we're forcing you to respond with your gut.
Yeah. The intuition. So that's exactly. So. And when I saw my own debrief, I was surprised that, what an extensive elaboration came out of just seeing the pictures, and just clicking on them. And that shows that how many people and what an extensive work and research, and your team has done on this wonderful work and assessment, which I'm really loving that I'm being part of this community. And I recommend to all the coaches out there, try this assessment and just for themselves and see how it works and how does it feel. And that was the theory part. So on the practical part, how is your model is being applied currently? And it seems that it has broad applicability.
Yeah, so it is. It's being applied in lots of different areas. That's one of the things that was a lot of fun for me over the past 3 years, was really taking this model and applying it to a whole series of different domains that have really tripped over meta theory. Like they don't really have any theory based on first principles. I've seen this referred to as the jingle jangle conundrum in some literature. I've seen it referred to as concept proliferation. There are articles that have been written, particularly in the business world, that basically say they call for a moratorium on new concepts until they have a solid meta theory to back it up. So that caused me to go through and analyze the literature and employee engagement, effective teaming, organizational culture, leadership effectiveness, even the concept of subjective well-being itself, the concept of human values, the concept of human goals, all of those, every single one of them, was immediately and thoroughly cleaned up by the application of this meta theory. So once you take this sort of, jumble of concepts in every one of those fields, you realize that employee engagement, for instance, is really about meeting people's needs. When your needs are met, you feel engaged. It's a sort of like, it shouldn't be that shocking, but that's what it is at the end of the day. Effective teaming, when you meet the needs of the team and the stakeholders, people feel good and they're effective. leadership effectiveness is defined, in my view, as the ability to meet the needs of your followers, to give them the satisfaction of their needs that they need. And the same thing is true of well-being. What makes somebody feel well? Well, it's a pretty squishy concept until you realize that they have these 12 needs, and if you've met these needs, then they feel good and they feel productive. If you have not met these needs, or you're sort of selectively meeting some needs and not others, and you certainly see this in organizations which prioritize certain things over others, some needs are being unmet, and there's a lower sense of well-being. So it can go in lots of places. The one place we're having a lot of success right now is with student well-being. There's everyone involved in academia and secondary school education and college knows that there's a huge problem of mental well-being, emotional well-being on campus. Lots of indicators of that ever since COVID, and actually even before. There's been a lot of loneliness, a lot of isolation, a lot of even suicide, unfortunately. And that is an area where there is a lot of openness toward trying to come up with a method that can screen large numbers of people very quickly, in a way that's fun and fast and on their phone, that's actually incredibly predictive of their overall state of emotional well-being. So we have a few pilots going on right now. We've got one with one of the State University of New York colleges. We have one at a private school outside of Boston. We have another one in the city of Kyiv in Ukraine with their public school system. So that's one area that sort of has particularly an open door to what we're doing.
Wonderful, so impressive, and I'm glad that you are also growing, globally as well. So, and just spreading your wings, to everywhere. What I like about your model, actually, David, you know that I'm so much into spirituality that the spiritual domain is very much being considered in that, and I do believe that our emotional well-being and spiritual well-being are kind of correlated and connected to each other as well. And spirituality is a human innate need as well, and it's also the one of their capabilities that they haven't discovered or practiced or understand it yet. So that needs a little bit more work on that. And the good news is that your book is coming. I have pre-ordered it and waiting for it to come out actually next week maybe, but I just want to let us know that what is your book about and how people can get it and when they can get it exactly.
Yes, well, I appreciate you pre-ordering. That's very nice.
I'm very curious, actually, to go more details on that.
It's a lot. It's a lot about me and a lot about my family and what the experiences that I had through life. I talk a lot about my father, who was one of the world's first sort of affective neuroscientists. He basically invented the field of behavioral neurology. So coming into this, I think my view was pretty skewed toward a kind of neuroscientific explanations of things. My mother was a psychiatric social worker, and she was very into spirituality as well. She was big into psychosynthesis, and she ran the Connecticut Psychosynthesis Institute and did a big clinical practice for her whole life, even until the very end. Sort of last days, she was still holding workshops.
Wow, so wonderful.
Yeah, and so those are sort of the twin influences that I point to, in addition to all the great professors and advisors that I've been lucky enough to encounter. But the book.
So I can say that the book is just the work of the few generation of the psychiatrists and psychologists coming through you. You are just a vehicle, for that delivery.
And that's how it feels. It felt almost sort of predestined that all of these pieces would fall into place the way they have. And it's been very interesting and very motivating because there's so many just really wonderful coincidences that just keep happening.
And I can say very inspiring. So it's just, for me, it's just all inspiration, the way that you have, being influenced by your parents, and all your work, and delivered this book as a gift to the world. So let us hear about it now.
Yeah. Yeah. So the book really deals with, in the beginning, like sort of what went wrong, and how the world has sort of taken a lot of these neuroscience findings, behavioral economics findings, psychological findings, and sort of used them to sort of make money off of people. And my point in the first chapter is that there is another way forward. These same insights can be harnessed for good and for well-being. So there's nothing inherently wrong with, people having more effective marketing, but there is something wrong with not kind of achieving the benefits that are available to the broader population and to helping people, take better control of their emotions and their emotional well-being. So that's sort of the starting point. I then introduce the concept of this model and say sort of, well, where did this come from? What are all the other models that are out there? Kind of quickly review those. Then I go into one domain at a time, starting with the self, then the material, then the social, then the spiritual, and kind of speaking about, one chapter for each one of those 12 needs. Mm-hmm. Each chapter kind of talks about what is the kind of, current thinking in this particular domain. What are the various theories of psychological safety, for instance? Where do they come from? Where are they going? And then how does my model basically intersect with that? And what are the other concepts that are already out there, just so you can kind of don't have to do that work yourself, and kind of align those concepts with my conception of safety, for instance. Mm-hmm. Then each chapter closes with a series of questions to ask yourself about your own need, in that case, for safety. Sort of what things and people make you feel safe, which things, upset that feeling of safety. What is it that you might be able to do in order to enhance your feelings of safety? And so it kind of goes from a kind of theoretical to a very practical within each chapter. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, it basically wraps up by doing some speculating. It talks a little bit about our method, but then it talks about, so are we done evolving as a species, or are there other forms of emotional needs that are still evolving? And that becomes a bit of an extrapolation, and I kind of that's a favorite chapter of mine because it is more speculative, and the basic point of that is that there's a kind of collapsing of boundaries that occurs, I think, at higher states of evolution, where the needs, for instance, between the self and the social and the material and the spiritual begin to collapse. And what you do for work, and what you want to do for material benefits also has spiritual benefits, and vice versa. So that there's a kind of an integration process that should go on. So that's sort of beginning to end.
So wonderful. And I assume it's going to be available on Amazon. And when exactly?
Yes. So the publication date is December 17th. So that is next week. Yeah. So
look forward to it.
Less than a week away. Yeah. I just heard from the publisher. It's, it's coming out of the press. It's actually, it now exists. It's on Amazon as a pre-order. It's also on Roman and Littlefield's website, pre-order there. So yeah, it's an exciting time.
That's wonderful, and congratulations. I'm so grateful for all the great works that you are doing for the world, David. So proud to have you on the board, and so proud to have you as a gift to the world as well. Any last words of wisdom, for our listener before we close?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one major insight that I kind of got a hold of, in doing the research for this, for the model and for the book, and the assessment, all of it, was that I think there's a mistaken belief in society today that sort of spiritual transcendence is something that is available to everyone if you simply wish it to be so. The point that I make in the book and the point I make in the model is that there is no spiritual transcendence without dealing with fundamental issues of justice and ethics first. That you can't just go from being a horrible person to meditating, which might make you feel better, but that's not ever going to lead to a true spiritual transcendence. And I think that's something that our society has sort of glossed right over, and the sort of desire for a spiritual transcendence has become another sort of marketing trick. If I put on this perfume, I'll have this sort of Zen moment. Yeah. That's not what it ever was about, and that's not what it ever will be about. That it requires the hard work of justice and ethics first.
Yeah, we definitely have to work on that, our spiritual muscle as well. So it's just that not only emotional intelligence has a muscle, so spirituality actually and spiritual intelligence has the muscles that we have to work on it. So lots of practice, and also, the innate human needs for it, I guess, is just driving us to that direction, hopefully, and the humanity as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, David, and I appreciate and I'm grateful again for being here today. And I wish the last month of the year, the month of reflection, and I'm glad that we are closing our podcast, interviewing you, and as a gift, bringing your book, to the world, and wish everyone a happy holidays and a wonderful new year as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kanush, so much. It's been a real joy having you in my life, and I really appreciate the opportunities that you've given me, and look forward to another great year ahead.
Yeah, same here. Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Goodbye to our listeners, and remember, one podcast at a time. Thank you for being with us for another one. You can visit our website at myconscious.org to learn more about us, or write to us at coach@myconscious.org. And please stay connected by following us on our social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, not to miss our upcoming episodes and events. Love and light from all of us to you. Make it a great day, everyone.